Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Space Between Us. How Jesus Teaches Us to Live Together When Politics and Religion Pull Us Apart. By Sarah Bauer Anderson. Foreword by Gary Bauer. Narrated by Lisa Larsen. Foreword. I first saw an image of our daughter Sarah on a sonogram taken 5 months after God began to knit her in the womb. 4 months later, I met her in person in the delivery room as Carol gave birth. It was love at first sight, just as it had been for each of our children and now grandchildren. At an early age, she loved reading and writing. She was independent, inquisitive, and full of spirit. Her mother and I watched her baptism with tears of joy when she accepted Christ into her life and she was born again. We cried when she went off to college. We partied when she married her husband Rodney and thanked God when he gave them children of their own. We could not be more proud of her and her siblings for the incredible, accomplished Christian men and women they have become. Over the years, God allowed me to experience amazing things in my work in the public square. I have sat in cabinet meetings, advised presidents, and flown on Air Force One. In 2000, I launched my own campaign for the GOP presidential nomination. For those who don't follow the news closely, you did not miss the Bauer presidency. I lost the nomination to a guy named Bush. I have experienced things that would have been unimaginable to me when I was growing up in a working-class neighborhood, in a family one missed paycheck away from disaster. But in quiet moments now, when I reflect on the experiences of my life, it is not the world of government and the struggles of politics that my mind dwells upon. Instead, it is the joys of family life, the hearth and home that flood my mind with precious memories. All of our children have brought us incredible joy. Each of them love the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jesus. Each of them believes Jesus is the answer to the ills of mankind. And each of them, including Sarah, has gone into an arena of American life to try to make our country and the world a better place. Sarah's latest contribution to the effort to make the world a better place is this wonderful, thought-provoking book, The Space Between Us: How Jesus Teaches Us to Live Together When Politics and Religion Pull Us Apart. It is a superbly well-written book that will make you laugh, cry, and think, sometimes simultaneously. In Washington, D.C., when the offspring of a public personality writes a book, the approaching publication date can lead to great anxiety and feared embarrassment for the parent. She's not going to tell that story, is she? On occasion, books by children about parents who are in the public eye can be the final straw that breaks asunder a family already on the edge of disaster. That is not our family, and this is not that kind of book. Each of our children are unique human beings with their own ideas, hopes, and dreams. Our different perspectives have never threatened our unity on the big things that matter. As Carol and I read Sarah's book, we felt nothing but love and pride that she has written such a heartfelt plea for civility and empathy in this age of turmoil and brokenness. Don't misunderstand me. I don't agree with every sentiment expressed in The Space Between Us. I have written 3 books myself, and I am sure Sarah would not agree with every page. And I must admit, I am a little worried that Sarah's frequent mention of our family's penchant for an occasional Manhattan might leave the wrong impression. That was a joke. But this is a book about Sarah's heart, and a wonderful heart it is. And like her, I too yearn for a time when it will be possible for more of our citizens to talk with each other as friends, fellow countrymen, and believers in the spirit that God would want us to. I hope and pray that you will be inspired by Sarah's book to try to heal the broken relationships in your own family, church, and community. Our country has important conversations and important decisions to make in the years ahead about the sanctity of life, racial discord, religious liberty, rebuilding families, and our need to restore virtue to our nation. The founders were right. Only a virtuous people can remain free. The space between us is an important and compelling contribution to that desperately needed conversation. Now sit back and enjoy. Gary L. Bauer. Introduction. There's a line from the Jewish Talmud that says, "If the house has fallen, woe to the windows." It's the idea that we are part of a connected collective, that we do not operate independently from one another, that the fate of each is bound up in the whole. It's a simple enough idea, but I suspect you and I might agree we aren't doing a very good job living as if this is true. We live deeply fragmented and divided lives in times where our politics, party, religion, denomination, and theology are revered and almost idolized above everything else. We hold to them so tightly that we are willing to justify all kinds of bad behavior to elevate our way of thinking, believing, and voting for the sake of self-preservation and self-elevation. And in the meantime, this collective house we live in, our shared experience, shared space, shared culture, is growing weaker. Its foundation is deteriorating, and its roof is caving. We have become so single-minded in promoting our own that we've compromised the integrity, goodness, and strength of the whole of our country, the whole of our faith, and the whole of the humanity we live alongside. It's become difficult to watch the news. Social media is often a dumpster fire. Conversations, debates, and free exchanges of ideas have become tense if they happen at all. On a lot of days, it doesn't look good. But I haven't given up hope. Don't get me wrong. There are days when, for me, the news channels stay off and social media stays closed. But it's not every day. And in fact, I refuse to believe we have gotten to the point of no return. Since you're listening to this book, I suspect you might feel the same way. And that's why what follows is for us. All of us who aren't quite ready to throw in the towel. It's for the people who haven't lost faith in the house, who have their feelings and opinions and ideas about the windows, but are trying not to lose sight of the bigger picture. It's for people who believe there is a better way. It's for the people who know the windows matter, but so does the house. And because the house is in poor shape, it's for the people who are asking the question, how are we going to make it right? As followers of Jesus, what is our responsibility? I can't promise to have all of the answers. I can't really promise to have most of the answers. But I can promise to share what I learned growing up outside the nation's capital as the daughter of a former Republican presidential candidate, and what I've experienced as an adult living inside the Bible Belt working in the church world. What you'll find is what I've come to believe is the best way forward, an alternative to the visceral times we live in. Saving the house starts, I believe, with asking a different question. We've been asking, how do I get others to change their minds, see as I do, come to my side and be like me? But what if, instead, we started asking, how can we begin to close the space between us? What if instead of trying to make us the same, we got better at understanding and appreciating where we are different? What if we learned to practice compassion in our differences instead of judgment? I know it seems simplistic, and I know it's certainly more complicated than that. But I'm not convinced it doesn't start there. So why not start there? I've never been mistaken for an optimist. I don't know many natives of Washington, D.C. who are. But these days, I'm as close as I've ever been. Because we've never been more poised for great change than right now. because we've never felt the need for a different way more than we have right now, because the time is ripe for something new, for a way to cross the widening space between us. And I think one of the most divisive people in all of history, Jesus, may offer us the best insight into how we go about doing just this. 1. Connection versus distance. Come, gentlemen, I hope we shall drink down all unkindness. Shakespeare. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 6, New International Version. It's a tradition, my dad says. In the early years of my parents' marriage, every weekend that my mom and dad would leave Washington, D.C. to visit my mom's parents in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, after navigating the rush hour traffic outside the city, after the lengthening gaps between houses, they would pull into the driveway and find my grandfather waiting. He'd be standing just inside the door with a tray in his hands, 2 gold-rimmed tumbler glasses with mallard ducks on the side, filled with freshly made old-fashions on it, ready to be passed off. It became a sort of thing between my dad and his father-in-law. The exhausting escape my parents made from the nation's hub, and the welcoming invitation of a cold drink and a warmly lit house just a few hours later in eastern Pennsylvania. That was more than 40 years ago, but the tradition remains. For my Southern Baptist friends, I'll give you a minute to let this idea of a family cocktail hour settle in. These days, my dad's the one who serves up the drinks when my husband Rodney and I turn down the street for a visit with our 2 kids. We've moved from old fashions to Manhattans, and the trip for us is from Atlanta to D.C. Since our trip also involves 2 small children, the Manhattans are desired starting about hour 3 of the 10-hour drive, preferably in IV form. It's one of my favorite things about coming home, still. And I don't even like Manhattans all that much. I'm more of a gin and tonic girl myself. We don't have a drinking problem. You should know that up front. I'd be worried too if the first thing I learned about a family was their cocktail preference. It's just that, in our family, when these drinks are passed around, they symbolize something. That no matter the literal or metaphorical distance between us, closeness is possible. That connection with one another is achievable and valued over anything else. That whatever baggage we brought with us, literally or metaphorically, can be left at the door. That shared stories bind us together more than shared beliefs, on both the big things and the small things. That no matter how much we may disagree when it comes to just about anything else, when the drink tray is passed around, we know our company with one another matters more. I know, it's just a drink. But sometimes, this drink is what facilitates our defenses coming down, our ties to one another being strengthened, and our differences being put in perspective. And we have some, a lot, of differences. We are a family of politicians and pastors. That's the main problem, because every one of us has made a livelihood out of the 2 most emotionally charged topics out there, the 2 areas most responsible for fractured friendships and strained relationships. This wouldn't be a big deal if we all landed on the same page on every issue politically and religiously. But we don't. It would be nice if we were quiet about our opinions when around one another. But we aren't. We know we don't always land on the same page with our beliefs and our voting records. But we still like each other in spite of it. And not because we ignore our differences. Politics and religion make up our livelihood. We have to talk about it. And honestly, we like it that way. We relish the conversations both politics and religion bring about. We thrive off of them and linger longer at the table dissecting and philosophizing over them. We debate and contradict and argue varying positions. Sometimes it gets uncomfortable, but we don't stop doing it. It's as much a part of our family culture as the Manhattans. It's who we are. It's the way we've always been. Disputing, discussing, deliberating. We can't escape them because they are in our DNA. An American fairy tale, or something like it. My parents were a match made in GOP heaven. Both had harbored dreams of living in D.C. and participating in local politics since their teenage years, and ended up moving to Washington in the late 60s. My dad to attend Georgetown Law School, my mom to intern for her local congressman the summer following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. 2 months later, when Bobby Kennedy was shot and killed in his run for the White House, my mom and her sisters joined the thousands who lined the streets of Washington as his body was brought to be laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Washington was where my parents' political fairy tale began. They met working for the Republican National Committee in 1970 and went out on their first date after my mom lost a bet to my dad. Her losing meant she had to clean his apartment, which looked exactly how you might imagine a bachelor pad to look. As she tells it, she arrived at his place, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, a mop and a bucket full of cleaning supplies in hand, her jaw set, determined to uphold her end of the deal, only to have my dad open the door to let her in and see himself out. Apparently, he had had somewhere else to be. When he arrived back at the apartment several hours later than it should reasonably take to clean an apartment, she was still there, stubbornly finishing up the job she said she would do. He felt so bad for her, he treated her to dinner afterwards. The rest is history. Ronald Reagan took office in 1980, 8 years after my parents got married, and the 8 years of Reagan's two-term presidency that followed were commonly known as the start of the conservative glory years, at least in our house. Every Republican of a certain age, which my parents were, looks back on those days fondly. My dad had been a fan of Reagan's long before he was even elected into office. He remembers being a senior in high school, watching Reagan give a speech and looking at his dad, a blue-collar worker who never graduated high school himself, and saying, "One day, he's going to be president, and I'm going to work for him." And my dad did. He started working for Reagan's campaign for $1 an hour, and eventually, he worked his way up to serving as Undersecretary of Education at the Department of Education, and then Chief Domestic Policy Advisor to the President. It became clear the political blood had been passed down from my parents' generation to my own when my younger brother, as a colicky and fussy baby, would only stop crying if we sang to him, "You're a grand old flag." I have memories of my baby brother strapped into the Jolly Jumper in the doorway to our kitchen as my mom made dinner while I tried to calm him with patriotic songs and a Big Bird hand puppet. On long car trips, while other families played Mad Libs or the license plate game, we listened to the We Sing America tape. Learning every verse to Yankee Doodle Dandy and America the Beautiful in the 12 hours it took to drive from Northern Virginia to Newport, Kentucky to visit my dad's parents. And then there were my birthday parties. As luck would have it, I shared a birthday month with the United States herself. It would only be right to capitalize on this serendipitous connection. My most memorable American-themed birthday party, that's right, there was more than one, was the "Come dressed as your favorite character in American history" party. I was Martha Washington, and somehow convinced my best friend to come as George, which included her wearing high-waisted pants and baby powdering her hair. That anyone showed up dressed to match the theme is no small feat, given Amazon Prime didn't exist yet. I can't speak for anyone else at the party, but to me, it was perfection. Even better, I was able to get a second wear out of my Martha Washington costume from that year's party. Every girl's dream, right? On September 17, 1987, I voluntarily came to school dressed up as Martha to celebrate the bicentennial of the signing of the United States Constitution. The school had not made it a dress-up day. I just took the liberty to do it myself. Everyone else was dressed in normal 80s fashion, Umbro shorts and acid-wash denim, while I was channeling the 18th century, making sure this historic but often overlooked date was properly celebrated. In the summers, my family would attend barbecues at the lake houses of the Washington elite. Here, the usually buttoned-up and professional political analysts were seen walking around in chinos, gingham, and carrying plates full of baked beans and coleslaw. It was a bit like seeing your teacher out in public. You assumed the talking heads on TV were real human beings, but seeing them out in real life was jarring. Like the time we got caught in a conversation with Democratic commentator James Carville, who was animatedly talking with a piece of corn on the cob stuck in between his front teeth. It showed more humanity than I was prepared to handle. My family's ties to the Washington political culture didn't seem weird at the time. They just were. It wasn't unusual to take messages from my dad from TV political personalities who called the house to see if he could give a soundbite on whatever the pressing issue of the day was. In an old Bible somewhere in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, I have a phone number for Britt Hume, former White House correspondent for ABC and current political commentator, because I couldn't find a pad of paper fast enough, so the Holy Scripture would have to work. Due to my dad's job in the Reagan administration and his next job heading up the Family Research Council in Washington as the political branch to the Christian conservative think tank Focus on the Family, our political world would sometimes bleed into the religious world as well. James Dobson, the president of Focus on the Family, and his wife Shirley would sometimes come to eat at our house, after my parents had hidden their alcohol stash from view, of course. We would all sit at the dining room table, my parents and the Dobsons telling stories and delving deep into theological discourse, interrupted only when Jim taught my brother, sister, and I how to put our hand through the flame of a candle without burning ourselves. A surprising move for a guy who was a family psychologist, and yet unable to read the nervousness coming from my mom as she watched her 3 young kids playing with fire. And in middle school, when I participated in a true love weight ceremony, an event students attended with their parents to sign a pledge committing to sexual purity before marriage, the whole ordeal was filmed by a television crew. The ceremony happened to take place on the same weekend my dad was being interviewed for a 60-minute segment. I was a shy and self-conscious preteen. The not-so-kind adolescent years made worse when I was inspired to get my haircut to resemble Amelia Earhart. A style choice that suggested true love for me might be waiting close to forever. My not quite comfortable in my own skin self saw the whole experience as a bit of a nightmare, being wired for a mic and followed around by video cameras and a couple of slightly uneasy and out-of-place cameramen who feared they had found themselves smack dab in the middle of a purity cult. In my time as part of a high school youth group at a Bible church in Northern Virginia, I hosted a weekly prayer breakfast at our house before school, where other high schoolers would show up before dawn to eat the fruits of my mom's labor of love, warm cinnamon rolls straight from the oven that she had woken up earlier than me to make for all of us. I sat on our youth group's leadership team, participated in my high school's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, even though I was in no way an athlete, and overall felt the comfort and safety that came from being raised in a house with strong Christian values. While my dad worked on the political front from an office in D.C., my mom did her part from home, hosting Bible studies and a book group for other moms, serving as a mentor mom for a Mothers of Preschoolers group, and writing a Washington prayer alert that went out to my dad's donors, keeping those outside of the Beltway attuned to the inner happenings of Washington and ways they could pray for our country's leaders. My dad would travel a fair bit in those years, giving speeches around the country. And though my mom loved the excitement and rush of the political world where she worked until the 1980s, she then chose to be a stay-at-home mom holding down the fort, never losing her zest for the issues of the day, but channeling her energy into us kids under her roof. In 1994, at a dinner one night in Washington, my mom was awarded by Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum the honor of Homemaker of the Year. It was a chance for her to receive the spotlight she deserved, the applause for her this time, a chance for her to be celebrated for her less prominent but no less important work. Like I suppose is the case for many adult children, I only now appreciate all she worked to do, all she gave up and sacrificed for us as kids to have the kind of childhood we did, tabling her own desires for our sake. While my dad may have more of a traceable presence in the public eye, her work in our private life was and is unmatched. By the time I graduated high school, I had become the poster child for what a teenager living in the evangelical Christian subculture looked like, and wouldn't have it any other way. I decided to kiss dating goodbye with Josh Harris, found evidence that demanded a verdict with Josh McDowell, and was challenged in passion and purity with Elizabeth Elliot. The nights not spent lying awake wondering over my eternal fate after reading Left Behind, I worried about spiritual warfare, thanks to Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness. That was my normal, my family's normal, in life just outside the Beltway, as tried and true Republicans and evangelicals. These were the political and religious experiences that shaped who I would ultimately become. Due to my childhood, escaping politics and religion was never in the cards. It's always been a part of who I am. An unexpected detour. But then, things changed for me. A lot. Or I should say, my mind began to change. I met and befriended people with different faith backgrounds. I started listening more to peers who didn't vote a straight Republican ticket. And they didn't seem misled or crazy. I started to see expressions of Christianity that were decidedly not evangelical, and though different and unfamiliar, they were refreshing. I engaged with a world different from the only one I had ever known, and found it more interesting and less scary, more nuanced and less definitive than I ever expected. As my world got bigger, as my experiences with people different from me accumulated, the way I had seen certain issues and ideas began to shift. What had once seemed obvious to me in terms of policies and theologies no longer did. I left the political bubble of D.C. for good after graduating college and relocated to the Bible Belt. And in the years that followed, the shift continued, in a veering away from the familial beliefs I inherited. And that complicated things. Every one of us in my family has kept the passion and conviction we were known for, but it has started manifesting itself in differing ideas and positions. It can no longer be assumed that when a topic like immigration, marriage equality, or gun control comes up, we will end up landing on the same page. Actually, these days, I can be sure we won't. And let's just say my current voting record is more checkered than my straight Republican upbringing would suggest is possible. In other words, my family has ended up more dissimilar in some ways than we ever thought we would in the big areas of both politics and faith. And that can be complex. Maybe disappointing if you are the parent. Maybe frustrating if you are the kid. And as a result, I've learned that one of the trickiest things about becoming an adult is learning how to bring my adult self into childhood relationships. or of having to reintroduce myself to everyone I know, as Lauryn Hill said. My family of origin in particular. These days, the need...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?